Hey Bookaholics, so welcome back to another video. Today I am bringing you a dedicated series review of The Nevernight Chronicle by Kristoff. The Nevernight Chronicle is a dark fantasy series that consists of Nevernight, God's Grave, and Dark Dawn. In this trilogy, we are following Mia Corvair, who witnesses her father's execution and her mother's arrest, and therefore swears revenge on those who have harmed her family. To get revenge on some of the most powerful people in this city, she must join the Red Church of Araya, which is a church that is also dedicated to training assassins. Amongst the tutors, we have conmen, murderers, thieves, and the like, and she needs all of their expertise so that she can take down everyone who she has sworn revenge upon. And we are following her journey as she becomes an assassin and then as she exacts the revenge that she has sworn to. While this series is one that I enjoyed, it is not one without its issues. Therefore, at the beginning portion of this review, I am going to quickly talk about the things that I did have problems with, and then afterwards, I'm going to talk about all the things that I liked. Therefore, if this is a series that you enjoy, you can skip ahead. I will leave it timestamped down below so that you don't have to hear me having issue with the series. But likewise, if you are someone who didn't like this series and you don't want to hear me gushing about it because of these issues, then you can just hear me agree with you, because this is a series of two halves to me. It is one that I did really enjoy, but I had huge problems with. Starting with the issues so that we can get them over and done with, I did have problems with representation, and that is something that does bother me in literature. It's not something that I am just like, yay for horrible representation. Amongst the issues that I did have are, we have a femme fatale protagonist. She is very archetypally femme fatale, and you can tell she's written by a man. It's one of those things that is just, this woman was written by a man. And woman is also questionable, because in the first book we are repeatedly, I think in the first chapter alone, we are told multiple times that Mia is 16 years old. And then we also have her sexualized. We have the scene of her losing her virginity on page, and we have a lot of sexualization of this child, of this girl, and that also makes me very uncomfortable. I appreciate that there is a part to this that is very much there to specifically depict it because it's supposed to be shocking, but it was still done with a little bit too lustier language for my liking when depicting a child's sex life. It is also, again, trying to depict this girl's horrific life, which again, I understand the purpose of it to an extent. I don't think that the language was right. All this to say, when it comes to Mia, which is one of my first issues, all of this to say when it comes to Mia is that my issues are to do with the language that is used most of the time. The language that is used to discuss her, to talk about how badass she is, how sexual she is, how young she is, all of these grouped in together. I don't think that it is done with harmful intent. Nothing in the language specifically sounded like he was trying to be misogynistic, but there were definitely issues there that I think maybe having some women read over the book and be like, dude, like, she's a child. Maybe not. I don't know. That was an issue that I had. I don't think that femme fatales are a bad thing. I just don't think that Kristoff was the right person to be tackling these things. He has a fantastic writing voice, but I just don't think it worked with this girl because of the specific type of language that's being used. So it's not that there's anything wrong necessarily with Mia, I just don't think that Kristoff is the right person to tell her story, even though he created her. You know what I mean. The other issue that I did have was a little bit in the LGBT sphere, which you think that I should love this because I am bi and Mia is bi. So bi representation, yay! But not yay. This style of depiction of bisexuality, the level of sexualization that you get when you're a woman and you're bisexual, Mia's representation there was quite triggering for me in that sense, because there's a lot of over-sexualization of her anyway. But then on top of that, the bisexuality, it feels like it was kind of only put in there to sexualize her more. It wasn't just a part of her personality. It wasn't something that she had to struggle with, which is good. It wasn't something that was there to trauma dump or anything, which is fantastic. But at the same time, it shouldn't make her sexier to the reader, I have issue with that. It might come from a personal place. That is why I am talking about it like this, because it is something that feels personal to me, because it is something that I experienced alongside a couple of my friends who are also bisexual, who were tackling the same thing. Then on top of that, we also have a little bit of bioessentialism going on. Again, I don't think that it is done with malice. I think it's just something that he thought to put in because he felt it was relevant to this story or to this section or to this phrasing or whatever, but it's bioessentialism. So again, it's accidentally trans exclusionary. I don't think it's transphobic. I don't think that it is fuck trans people. It just, as usual with anything bioessentialist, erases trans people. So again, not one that I would recommend strongly to the LGBT community, which, given that this series a lot of time is pitched as welcome LGBT people because you have a bisexual protagonist, it is one that if you are bi and you have struggled with what I was saying about sexualization, then that might be triggering to you. And likewise, if you are trans and are obviously for reasonable reasons triggered by bioessentialism and thus the trans exclusionary side of that, I would also proceed with caution. That being said, everything else I enjoyed, but I did want to separate these two parts because this is something that is genuinely a problem, and therefore I wanted to mention it, but I also enjoyed the series. So those of you who are like, ew, that's awful, have heard me rant and therefore will be like, okay, I don't want to hear you gush about a series that has these things in it. And likewise, people who love the series don't really need to hear me rant because there's no need, they've already read it and they like it anyway. Do with this information what you will, and now I'm going to proceed to gush about this series I've just criticized. Into the gushing section though, I did really like the way that it was written. Issues aside from the first portion of the video, I really loved the writing style. I loved the fourth wall breaks. I think they were hilarious. I loved the way that we have this series that is told through lots of different mediums. So we have the bit in italics, essentially, which is the past timeline, where you're told this in this very fanciful manner, and I think that was done really well. Then we have the present timeline, which I think was really punchy and really snappy, and then you have the footnotes, which are essentially world building and additional information, occasionally the snide comment. You have almost like a conversation going on in the footnotes, which I thought was hilarious and really added to the story. So all of that comes together so nicely. When it comes to the characters, aside again from issues in part one, I do think that they were entertaining. I do think that they were potentially a little bit caricaturesque, but in the best way, in a fun way, in an engaging way. Mr. Kindly is very feline, and you have Eclipse, who is very canine, and the contrast between the two and the reactions that each of them will give to situations I thought was a really good shoulder demon, shoulder angel, but like instead of shoulder demon and shoulder angel, you have shoulder wolf and shoulder cat. Was a good contrast, and I liked that. The surrounding characters, old Mercutio is of course one that is mentioned frequently, and he is a very interesting character to be following, to be seeing. The interactions that he has with Mia are always fantastic. I liked the sections at the Red Church. I do think that we potentially could have spent a bit more time there and developed some of the surrounding characters a bit more, but especially given what happens later on with the school. But I do think that it was handled well enough and it was engaging. And overall, I think that the characterization was engaging and entertaining. Are these characters realistic? No. Are they ones that I'm going to forever adore and that have taken a bit of my soul because of how deep they are? No. Were they a load of fun to follow? Heck yeah. The plot, not unpredictable. Even the subversions of the tropes have been done so often that you kind of need to subvert the subversion at this point. Still fun, still engaging. I think that the plot flowed well. I think there was good consistency throughout the whole series, and I think that it is one that the pacing really drives you through and really keeps you going. So while not necessarily the most innovative story, I enjoyed it. Now, when I did a TBR video, I think I mentioned that this is compared to Throne of Glass, and then other people said, no, I get it. I get the comparisons to Throne of Glass. I do think that Mia Corvair is the R-rated version of Selena. in a way. So the comparison is there for me, not in terms of writing style, not in terms of setting. Even the plot eventually diverge completely insanely, and obviously Throne of Glass eventually becomes a romantasy while Nevernight is not. So obviously they do diverge, but I do understand the foundational comparison between the two. So if you like Throne of Glass and you want a darker, less romantasy, older version, I actually think you should try this out. All this to say that this was a fun series, an engaging series, a series that I would reread, that I had fun with, that if you don't mind the representation issues that I mentioned, you could also really enjoy this series. I just think that it is one that has a few problems. With that in mind, I gave books 1 and 2 3 stars because they were a 4-star story with a 2-star amount of problematic content. And then book 3, while the problematic content was still there, I enjoyed the conclusion. I did feel connected with everyone by the end of it. Obviously, feelings and stuff that have developed over the course of the series really come to the forefront in that conclusion, which basically means that it got an extra star. So the problematic content docking a star every single time, but the enjoyment going up each time. So arguably, if I wasn't someone who was bothered by the content issues, then it would be 4-star, 4-star, 5-star. But because of the problematic content, they are 3-star, 3-star, 4-star. Again, this is up to you and what you are willing to put yourself out for. I am really sorry that this video, at least the beginning of it, did have a very vulnerable section. I wanted to put that out there for anyone else who is also who is potentially at risk when picking up this series. I do think content warnings in that regard are important, but it is a fun series. So if you are someone like me who is like, okay, now I know that, I can just kind of put the blinders on and just have fun with it and just kind of ignore that shit, then you will have a good time with this series. That's why I wanted to put this review out there. It needs to be one where you go in with the knowledge that you need to understand what you're getting into with this series. But that is it for this review. I'm sorry it's a little bit longer than my usual ones, but again, I think that representation conversations are important. But that is all for me for today. So if you have read the series and you've enjoyed it, do let me know. How do you feel about content warnings when it comes to representation? Also, if based on my enjoyment of this series, you can think of another series that I might enjoy, also list it down below because I'm always on the prowl for more things to add to my never-ending TBR. But that is it. So I'll hopefully catch you in another video soon. Bye!